Now I'm going to ask Mike to come up, and we're going to shift focuses from a little bit from nationwide to local. If you'll stand right there, you'll be on the...
All right. Thank you, Randy. Yeah, we're going to shift gears just for a minute, but before we do, I wanted to let you know that we have a very special visitor that's coming to this meeting very, very soon. It's the brother of General Flynn, Joe Flynn. I was on the phone with him this morning at about 11 o'clock, and he thought that he would be able to come here very soon. He's on his way to Washington right now to be with his brother. The last hearing is supposed to be happening this Friday in the appeal. This is a very big case, as we all know, and we need to be praying for him. He asked that everyone that fears the Lord to be praying for him. So just keep him in mind and his brother this coming week. What I want to talk to you about before we see a very important video, this video, you're going to really like it. It's only 9 minutes, and we're going to do it in 2 sections. It's epic. It's very, very historical. And it was done in 1963, part of it. The second part of it was done in 1984. But before we do, I wanted to talk to you about some of the flyers that you've been given tonight. The bright green one, it says, "Time is running out, folks." How many agree with that? Yeah, we're in a real situation. I don't think I have to tell anyone that. That's obvious. But not all of us understand what time it is. Not all of us understand how urgent the hour is. So we have been holding some meetings here, and the owner of this facility, Kurt and his wife, Jennifer, have agreed to let us use it, and we have to consider them in this effort, and we want to thank them very much for their generosity. If you would, if you have the time tonight, please just fill this out with your ideas, your input, and if you could and you feel comfortable, leave your contact information, email, and a phone number. We're also setting up a text alert system because in the future, things are going to happen quickly and urgently. You're going to need to be contacted. And the best way to do this is through a texting system. So if you would kindly leave your text information, if you would, and we could include you in the network. That would be very helpful. The other sheets that I have here, this blue one, this is very relevant to what's going on right now in the news with the police, the shootings, the black protest. I would ask you to sincerely take a look at this blue flyer that gives you a statistical analysis of the facts regarding police shootings of whites, Hispanics, and blacks. The fact is, the blacks are getting killed and shot in a very high, disproportionate manner. Now, we as Republican conservatives, we traditionally have been very supportive of the police, and rightfully so. But like the politicians, you know, the politicians have gotten out of control. Government has gotten out of control. Has the police departments and the sheriffs been exempt? Have they not fallen victim to being out of control? I don't think so. I think they have gotten a little out of control. Vast majority of the police and sheriff's departments are great, outstanding citizens and serve the people very well. But the fact is, we're getting too many people killed unnecessarily by our government. More people during the Iraq-Afghanistan war were killed by our own police departments than our enemy at war in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is something we need to think about, folks. Seriously. And this statistical analysis speaks for itself. This is the truth about how many killings have occurred. Just think about it. Finally, if you take a look at the yellow sheet, This is a speech that I gave to the Charlotte County Commissioners meeting clear back in April at the beginning of the pandemic. Most of us that are awake call it the scamdemic. How many of you know or have heard of Dr. Francis Anthony Boyle? Two people. Okay. You know, the Bible says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." He is the #1 expert in this country on bioweaponry, biowarfare. Clear back in 1989, Dr. Boyle drafted a document that was adopted by the Congress unanimously. That never happens, folks. That is very rare, that a document be adopted and put into law by a unanimous vote. It was signed into law by George Bush Sr. He is now declaring, and he declared it very, very early on, that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has been criminally infiltrated. The WHO, the World Health Organization, is basically run by the Chinese communists, the butchers of Beijing. We haven't seen half of the people they killed in the Tiananmen Square slaughter. And this is the #1 expert on biowarfare that is declaring this. But yet today, my fiance and I go to the county commissioners meeting, and we are told that we can't sit beside each other because of social distancing requirements that our government leaders have declared we must follow if we want to attend the Charlotte County Commissioners meeting. These are the people you put into office, folks. These are the people that spend your tax money. And they're telling me that I can't sit beside my fiance because they're trying to protect me. Are you serious? Are we in a dream? I just don't know what to say, folks. This is beyond belief. I told him it was absurd, and I gave a 3-minute speech about how absurd it was and how embarrassed they ought to be for advocating such a law. You know, your money, it's funny how the government wants to keep you separate. They want to keep a mask over your face, but they sure let you spend your money who has been held by thousands of other people. Why don't they want to protect you from the currency that has been touched by people with COVID-19? Don't you find that a little troubling? Isn't that a little odd? It's called Just Us. It's not Justice System, it's the Just Us Club. And you know what? I've been following Q too. I enjoyed Mark's discussion about Q. I've been following Q from the beginning. I find it very interesting. And if there are any Q people out there listening, like this dear lady Barbara said, she has problems sometimes understanding the cryptic messages, and I too. And I'm a pretty smart guy, I think. I don't really have time for riddles. Folks, we are out of time. I hope there is a Q. I hope there is a deep secret operation going on within the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. But folks, we can't rely on what we're being told is going on. I hope it's going on, and I'm pretty sure there is something going on. I think that's pretty clear. But we too, the people, need to get organized. That's one thing the left has surpassed us in. They proved that when Obama got elected. They used the internet in the most phenomenal way. They went circles around Republicans. But thank God, Mr. Trump has one excellent technology guy. I forget his name. Yes. That too. That's most important. But folks, we must get involved in action. Talking about the symptoms is not going to work anymore. We've been doing that for 30 years. Personally, I got woke up in college up at Ohio State University in the middle 80s. I remember sitting in a think tank room at Ohio State with a bunch of old people. I was always the youngest guy in the room. Everybody else was 50 and older. They were old people to me at that time. Now I'm one of those old people. But you know what? We sat in a room clear back in the late 80s, middle 80s, and we were talking about how the New World Order was going to do their dirty work when the time came to pull the rug out. And a pandemic was the choice, the weapon of choice. We were sitting in a room 30 years ago talking about this. And I was listening to the elder minds in the room talking about how the New World Order would most likely use a pandemic to take over. And that's exactly what's happening. I urge you to read this yellow sheet, find out about Dr. Francis Anthony Boyle. You want to hear an expert tell you the truth? Listen to Dr. Francis Anthony Boyle. It's real simple. Go on YouTube. Do a search, an internal search on YouTube. Just type in his name, and you will find lots of videos of him declaring what I told you. And then you need to share this with your friends. Turn off the network TV. Turn off Fox News. They're just as deceptive as CBS. They just put a little more sugar on it. They do let a couple of them talk about God and the Bible and the gospel every once in a while, but they're very deceptive. And as far as Q is concerned, I'd like to know, when are they going to ask Mr. A.G. Barr, why is Mr. Barr withholding secret evidence about Saudi Arabia and Israeli involvement in 9/11? How many of you knew that Israel and Saudi Arabia was involved in 9/11? 5, 6, maybe 7 people. Folks, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact. The evidence is overwhelming. The very day of 9/11, 5 men were arrested, 3 of which worked for Mossad, the Israeli deep secret intelligence agency, whose motto says, "With deception we shall wage war." These 5 men were arrested the very morning of 9/11. 3 were Mossad. They were identified as Mossad agents. They were held by Michael Chertoff at the Justice Department for 64 days. Now, you haven't heard about this. Fox News briefly reported on it. Carl Cameron had enough guts to report on it, and the editor let him. But that was the only news channel in this whole country that reported this fact. They were released 64 days later. They went back to Israel. As soon as they get to Israel, and you can watch this on YouTube. It's common knowledge. This is not a disputable matter. As soon as they get to Israel, they're asked on a TV talk show, "Why did you go there? Why did you go there and record the event?" They said openly, without fear or hesitation, "We went there to document the event." Now, do you understand when someone tells you they're going somewhere to document an event, they have prior knowledge? This is reality, folks. Our nation is undergoing a coup, a hard coup, since 9/11. And actually, even before that. Because if any of you did any research about Vietnam War, you will know that that was also a military-industrial war to fund and to milk their cash cow. And the same people that were involved in that, their children and their offspring, political offspring, are now involved in what is going on in this country today. The banking system, the banking system is the engine of tyranny. If you want to find out who is controlling things and who is empowering things, check out who owns the banks. There is one group worldwide that owns the banks, the media, and the technology companies. That is the common denominator that needs to be exposed. I'll let you do your research, and once you begin your research trail, it will become self-evident to you who these people are. Jesus spoke of them in the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9. He said, "There are those who claim to be Jews but are liars." Folks, this is the Bible. This is not my opinion. Then in chapter 3, Revelation, he says the same thing. They are a synagogue of Satan. They're counterfeits. So read Jesus' words. Don't believe me. Just realize that we have been infiltrated in this country by a very powerful entity. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the video, and we're going to watch a black man from 1963, whom you've all heard of, talk about how the political forces in the Democratic Party are the black man's worst enemy. And then after he's done, we'll interrupt and begin another session.
In order to truly understand In order to truly understand why America is the way it is right now, you have to go back in time. You have to look a little deeper. This situation is far more complicated than they make it out to seem. So many people have asked me, why is this happening? How is it possible that one incident in Minneapolis can cause rioting all across the world? We're seeing riots in France, we're seeing riots in England, we're seeing riots all across Europe, and of course, all throughout the United States. So what is the reason for this? Well, before we get into this interview from 1984, I'm going to leave you with some words from Malcolm X. This was recorded in 1963.
The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful, more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or a weapon in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and the white conservatives. The American Negro is nothing but a political football, and the white liberals control this ball through tricks or tokenism, false promises of integration and civil rights. In this game of deceiving and using the American Negro, the white liberals have complete cooperation of the Negro civil rights leader, who sell our people out for a few crumbs of token recognition, token gains, token progress.
Now what you're going to see is an interview that took place in 1984. 1984. And the man you're looking at is G. Edward Griffin. How many of you read or have heard of his book, The Creature from Jekyll Island? It gives you a detailed understanding as to how our financial system was created, what it's doing, and what it has done, and what it's going to do. He is probably the #1 expert in America alive today about the banking system. Before him, it was Eustace Mullins. When he wrote his book, he got most of his information from Eustace Mullins, who was one of those old people up at Ohio State University back in the 80s that was talking to us in think tank class. So what you're going to hear now is a Russian defector that left the KGB a long time ago, and he was free and escaped and was living in the United States in 1984. Yuri Bezmenov. So I urge you to listen to him very carefully when he describes to you how the communists planned to take over America. They have 4 steps. The first one is to demoralize a nation, and he'll tell you that happened 25 years ago in America, and he was even surprised how bad it got. Number 2 is the destabilization of a country. Number 3, then the crisis occurs. And then number 4, normalization. How many of you heard about the new normal they're talking about? Okay, we're there. Let's start the video.
Now that you heard what Malcolm X has to say about this situation, let's take a look at this 1984 interview with Yuri Bezmenov. He was a defector from the KGB, and he has some insights as to what's going on today. Check this out.
Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world, that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis. to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect.
Well, folks, that was End Times Productions. That's a channel on YouTube that you need to subscribe to. That's one of hundreds of channels. Now, earlier I was making some statements and making some comments about factual evidence and reporting on facts regarding certain groups of people. And it's not very popular to name names and to name groups anymore in America. I have a YouTube channel, and I did a video on 9/11. I gave a speech out in Sebring, and I named names, and I named groups, and YouTube deleted the video. This is what's happening in America. Truth is no longer tolerated. They don't want to hear the truth anymore. And that's why we are about to begin holding an assembly where we can discuss how we go forward, how we resolve these problems without government or some corporation controlling us. You know, our founding fathers, when they realized the British tyranny was knocking at the door of America, they began to form organizations in their counties called committees of safety, committees of correspondence, and they did this to fight the British, rhetorically at first. They didn't want war, they wanted peace, and they wanted to do it with intelligence, educating the people about the truth. And that's what we need to do. And that's why we need to hold and conduct an assembly in Charlotte County, where we, the people, deliberate with a lawful technique that is recognized throughout this country for over 240 years. So I hope that you will stick around. After this meeting is done, we're going to hold another meeting in the corner with just a few people probably that are serious about remedy and self-defense, and I don't mean guns, I mean rhetorically speaking, defending your truth with facts and evidence through like a media militia where we provide you information factually based through a form of a militia media through the internet. So I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I would love to answer anything you might have or a comment. And I wanted to hear from the people tonight. I wanted to give an opportunity for the people to speak and to let it be known what their concerns are, because this will be put on YouTube, and the commissioners of Charlotte County, Lee County, and Sarasota County will see it. We will make sure of that. So if any of you would like to make a comment, I would urge you to come on up and do so. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's stand.